Welcome to the Path and Purpose podcast, where we explore the journey of living and leading from your soul's purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Cameron Martin. As a spiritual coach and leader, I've dedicated my life to helping changemakers, creatives, and conscious leaders align with their soul's calling. In each episode, we dive deep into the stories of those who are paving the way for a more conscious and compassionate world. My purpose is to explore the intersection of spirituality and leadership, offering you practical insights and inspiration to live and lead with authenticity. Join me as we discover how to embrace our soul gifts, overcome barriers, and learn to lead from being. This podcast will inspire you to live in alignment with your soul's purpose and create a lasting impact, one conversation at a time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Path and Purpose podcast. I'm so happy to have you here with me. On today's episode, I have Jeremy Griffin, otherwise known as J-Griff. Jeremy is the founder of the Level Up Collective and the host of the Conscious Wealth podcast. He pioneers a unique blend of 5D meets 3D. His methodologies blend high-level esoteric knowledge with spiritual embodiment and financial literacy. He's all about conscious capitalism, mastery of law, and the embodiment of the secrets of the 1%. I am excited to share this space with J-Griff today, and you're going to hear that this episode is a little bit different than my other guest episodes. So we are in season 2, and in this episode, I'm going to begin by sharing a little bit about Jeremy from his birth chart. So we're going to be looking at the astrological perspective of him as a guest. And actually, you're going to see throughout the episode that I'll continue to refer to his birth chart in astrology. This is really a fun conversation that him and I had, but you're going to see the power of his chart literally come alive in our conversations. This is what's very special about this particular episode, and I'm excited to share it with you. Now, aside from the astrology reading, Jeremy and I go pretty deep on leadership and what we can kind of think of as the leadership illusion, this illusion of the world of control and manipulation, this leadership paradigm. In our conversation, we're going to be talking about manifestation and how manifestation and the laws of the universe actually help us in leadership and in our leadership development. We also talk about how the leadership journey itself can be a spiritual journey, and that by being an entrepreneur and by running your own business, that really that can be a catalyst for your spiritual awakening. I talk about this a lot with clients of mine, and I say to them, you know, if you want to really heal yourself, go be an entrepreneur, because all of your limiting beliefs are going to come up. And if you really want to heal yourself, go be a spiritual entrepreneur, where you're going to have to heal yourself and deal with karma and patterns and limiting beliefs. Because if you're going to be an entrepreneur, all of the things that limit you from showing up, from making money, from being seen, from feeling valued, all of that comes up. And so Jeremy and I explore just how running a business and leading a business can be a spiritual journey in and of itself. In our conversation, we also talk about finding a balance between being and doing, and allowing our being to inform our doing. Now, I've shared in recent episodes my understanding of being-centered leadership. And this is this concept of really connecting with our being, connecting with our essence, our soul first, and then allowing that to speak through the work that we're doing. Jeremy explains how he sees that in his own work and how he applies that in his context. Jeremy also shares something that I think is really important that I often share with my clients, which is this understanding about our zone of genius. So if we want to lead from our being, we need to become really aware of what is our zone of genius. What are we good at? And maybe what are we not fantastic at, so that we can focus our attention to manifest properly. So for example, in my business, well, I am quite the jack of all trades. I can do a lot of different things, but social media, not my forte. Video development or video production, not my forte. That's why this video that you're watching is being produced by a team member of mine. But what is my forte is leadership and being there for people and connecting big picture. Strategy is something that I'm very, very good at. And so when we understand ourselves at a soul level and at an energetic level, we can start to actually align with our zone of genius. And when we do that, our leadership actually becomes a lot easier. It becomes much easier to just be. And so Jeremy and I explore the idea of our zone of genius and working within our zone of genius as an expression of leadership. Additionally, we talk about how we can move through seasons of leadership in our lives and specific tools that leaders can use to come to know themselves better. Of course, astrology is one of them. Finally, the episode completes with Jeremy sharing his vision for the future of leadership, which is aligned with many visions that I have for leadership as well. So I thank you for joining me for this episode, and I hope that you enjoy it. Jeremy, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here with me on today's show.
Appreciate you, Cameron. Excited to dive into conscious leadership with you.
Likewise. So really in the show, we're talking about leadership as an expression of our being, leadership as an expression of really our soul's purpose. And so I wanted to start by first making a few comments about your birth chart. You, as a soul, choose to come into a body, right, and have this game down here on planet Earth. So talking a little bit about just your signature as it relates to leadership, and then I'll let you respond to it however you feel. Does that sound good?
Yes, sir. I was telling you before we started recording, my whole life, my mom's been telling me 2 different times for what time I was born, so I've never actually had full clarity on which human design I am or anything like that, and I get asked it all the time, so excited to close the case here once and for all.
Okay, well, we got it. So taking a look at a couple of things in your chart, the one thing that stood out to me most, and I wanted to mention this first, is your North Node. Which in astrology, the North Node is connected to our sense of really our mission in life, why we came here, what we're evolving toward, what we're growing toward. And of course, our personality plays a role with that. But ultimately, this is kind of your guiding light, if you will, in life. So your North Node is in Capricorn and it's in the 12th house. Capricorn energy is all about structures, authority, power, organizations. Capricorn rules things like achievement. If we think about the goat that climbs up a mountain, if you ever watch a goat scaling the side of a mountain, they just like do it and get up there. It's a sign that is very much about responsibility around organizations of people, around governments, power, this kind of thing. And so these are lessons, lessons of authority, lessons of achievement. This is important for you in your life. And in particular, where it sits in your chart is your 12th house. And in astrology, the 12th house is the house of transcendence. It's the house, it's the last of the houses that really is about all the things that are not of the physical world. This is a house of spirituality, of the subconscious, of consciousness itself, of our dreams, of our intuition, of illusions sometimes as well, and deception. But very much a non-physical house, we could call it that. So it's really interesting because actually what this suggests is that in other lifetimes, you have developed a very strong nurturing sense. Your South Node is in Cancer, so emotional awareness, emotional intelligence, nurturing, caring for others, this kind of thing, which sits in your 6th house of work. So you have no problem being busy and getting things done and accomplishing. But in this life, it's much more about creating a foundation, creating something that lasts, a legacy, if you will. But it is ultimately of the subconscious, spiritual, transcendent realm, which might be less comfortable. But that's ultimately sort of what you're moving towards. So I know what you do for work. But when I looked at that, I smiled and went, wow, that's really cool. So I just want to give you some space to respond to that.
Oh, man. Wow. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. We both we both know what I have grown to become and now do for work. And it's something that I never intended to do consciously, something I never thought I would be doing. And hearing a reading like that is quite illuminating, because in many ways it feels like this work chose me. I didn't necessarily choose it. At least it feels that way often. You mentioned like systems and organizations and authority.
And you're laughing because, for those who don't know what you do,
Yeah. Well, I help people on the surface level. I help people achieve financial freedom, but it's far deeper than that. We put an immense focus in helping people liberate themselves spiritually. And one of the biggest reasons on this planet at this time why more people aren't liberated spiritually is because they've fallen asleep to who and what they actually are and why they came here. And it's damn hard to self-actualize when you can't even see past Friday because you don't know how you're going to pay the bills. And, so we have this planet of enslavement, if you will. And it's a trip because from a certain perspective, it's voluntary. And so number one, we have to take radical ownership and we have to wake up to that. How are we participating with this? And we have to seek, new information, new paradigms, and go a lot deeper than just, learning about money or credit, and really remember, like, as I say all the time, who the fuck we are and, why we came here. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about what I do. And there's an aspect of law, there's an aspect of sovereignty, there's an aspect of investing, there's an aspect of service to others. And so that reading, I mean, yeah, I've never heard Capricorn described like that, but that's very spot on. I mean, I feel, I'm sure you hear this a lot, but I feel very seen.
cool. That's only one aspect of your being, but it's is really interesting. And again, with that being in the 12th, um, this is a lot about pushing past illusions, about pushing past what we thought things were, and especially structures and authority and things like that. So um, you're, I mean, I could ask you if you think you're on mission, but I would think you'd probably say yes.
Yeah. Our offering where we help people transition into what you could say is living more in the private is literally called Self-Trust Academy. And the reason that I called it that is because so much of my journey with this stuff that you just beautifully contextualized, but I obviously have been living it without these frameworks a lot of the time. And a lot of my journey has been coming back to how much do I trust the creator, and thus how much do I trust myself? And there is this aspect of what do you do when the entire world, from the moment you incarnate here to present moment, is trying to convince you of this story, of this dream, of this illusion, that this is real and that this is what's right and that this is what's possible. It has to fit inside of this box. But you, at the same time, your entire life, you've been gifted a knowing that this isn't real and that the things you've been told aren't all that there are, and that essentially there's some semblance of this veil that some of us in this life are able to see through, and kind of coming to grips with that. So I very much so resonate with this notion of illusion and some of the unseen realms, because that's been one of the most challenging aspects of my journey. I mean, you want to talk about the hero's journey and the spiritual journey. It's like, for most of us who have walked the path, one of the most common things you'll hear is how lonely it is. And part of the reason that it's so lonely is because you're on this 3D terrain and you're in this 3D quality game, but 99.9% of people aren't seeing, feeling, sensing, or experiencing what you are. So you start to feel a little crazy. You start to feel alone. You can be in a crowded room, but you feel like you're the only one there because everyone's happy to eat the food and drink the Kool-Aid and watch the programming and just go along with, keep going down the conveyor belt. So yeah, it very much so feels like, as you mentioned, this lifetime for me is definitely a big one of stepping all the way into full faith and remaining awake to things that I may have fallen asleep to in past lives.
Yes. Yeah, and I'll say just two other things. Looking at your chart too, you have Jupiter in uh, Virgo, so you have great abundance when it comes to service and teaching others. There's abundance, there's expansion, there's growth for you. There's a lot there in terms of serving and helping, particularly around mindset and people's subconscious and their belief systems, because that's sitting in your eighth house. But the thing that is for you to work with in this life is healing Chiron's wound. Everyone is the same, but for you and I have the same one, Chiron in Leo, which is really about showing up and being seen and being the leader from really a place of uh, authenticity and charisma, not so much the I'm forcing a particular position upon you, but the fact that people are just looking to you, and sort of being in the limelight there. A lot of times, this is a wound where people rejected us in other lives, or our ideas were radical, or whatever. And so now there's this desire to maybe serve, but do it a little less in the limelight. But guess what? We have to. You have to be seen. Um, and that's how that works. When you were talking about illusions, which I think opens the context for this conversation for my listeners and for you, um, for me, one of the biggest illusions in life where I was like, okay, there's something way, way, way wrong here, had to do with leadership. So when I was a high school business teacher, I really loved my job, but I worked under some very poor leaders. And I mean, like, people totally not capable of doing their jobs in an effective manner. And they were very destructive emotionally for people, and myself included. And I was in a master's program in school leadership, thought I wanted to be a school principal. The whole idea of, okay, well, I can make this better, right? And so I'll go into this principal program and I'm going to do this better because our kids deserve it. And then the only thing I learned from that program was I want nothing to do with school principal. That sounds like hell. And so I don't want to do this. And again, this knowing deep within myself that this is just wrong. What I'm seeing is wrong, and that people don't understand what it means to really lead. And people are creating a lot of damage in the process because they're operating from ego, because they're operating from pain and trauma, and they don't even have access to themselves. And so that led me to apply for a PhD program because I thought, okay, well, maybe we've got to really push the envelope on this and see what are the big scholars and these people who are, leading leaders. What are they talking about? And much to my dismay, or perhaps not, a lot of the same, of like this idea of control and manipulation. And if you want to reach these outcomes, they're always short term, right? Nothing is ever long term. If you want to reach these outcomes, then we must do this and pull this lever and manipulate that human. And this whole thing was so gross to me. And there are beautiful scholars in the world who are doing different work in the space of more conscious leadership. But we have, I believe, a consciousness issue on the planet, of course, and especially in leadership, where many leaders, most leaders, I'll go that far to say, they don't truly know themselves. And because they don't know themselves, they don't understand the context in which they operate. Why are we even doing this? What is the point of leading to begin with? And it wasn't until and I'm sitting in all these courses and reading research and going, wow, they're just totally missing it. They're not getting the the why. Why do we lead? What is this thing called leading? What is this leadership stuff about? And for me, leadership is an act of creating space for being.
Mm.
But we have to honor being. We have to recognize being. And this, in the way I just had this conversation with you, kind of put you on the spot for the audience, but had this bit of a conversation about who you be. Now we're going to talk about how this translates, of course. But for me, that was a big place of illusion. Like, no, we have this wrong. We are not conceiving of leadership in the right way. What is the point? Leading is about humans. It's about people and our impact on the world, of course. But this is something that is soul level, heart level. This is something that requires a true connection with your being, not this, oh, cool, you got promoted to this thing, do these things, check this box, make sure that if you're managing people that, you reach whatever targets so that financially in this quarter you get your bonus and blah, blah, blah. This whole thing is dying, in my opinion. I think we're seeing that in the world, especially since 2020, with so many people moving into entrepreneurship and quitting their jobs and all of this. And we're seeing political changes in the world and all kinds of people recognizing like there's something wrong with our leaders. But for me, this was a big place of illusion, which had me asking very different questions.
I mean, that's powerful. I've been on both sides of leadership. I've been on the receiving end and I've been on the leading end. And while you brought up a whole lot, I think one of the key things that, kind of came through when you're talking is from all the leadership, I'll say knowledge that I've consumed, you have like a few main camps. You have the majority, which I would say is where they're looking at leadership as like a process and they're overlooking the people aspect of it. And then you have the minority that actually goes, no, like, let's not look at it as a process. Let's focus on the actual people. And that's like a little bit better step in the right direction. But what you're speaking to is like above both of those, which is like, it starts with self. And I would even say source. And then through that, through you comes leadership. And you don't have to worry as much about tactics and strategies and getting caught up in left brain games, because you're coming from a place of authenticity and you're speaking from your soul to theirs and operating from your soul, helping theirs. And that's a totally different leadership dynamic that I agree with you is, very uncommon on this planet. And that's why people like you are here right now.
I mean, to recognize that really most leadership, the way that it's happening on planet Earth at the moment, is egoic. And what I mean by that is connected to the structure of the ego, of identifying, of controlling, of manipulation, of fear, right? All of these things that people take for granted as, oh yeah, that's just what it means to lead. Like instill fear and manipulate people to do X, Y, and Z. And I don't ascribe to that. I don't believe that that's leadership. I believe it's control, but I don't believe it's leading, because leading really is about allowing the divine to express through you, right? Knowing that, yes, I have this history in this past, this avatar Cameron Martin has had an experience of living, but my higher self, source, creator is working through me in every moment that I allow it, right? And then leading from that perspective is really just an expression of being. Hey everyone, I've got a great free resource for you that I think you'll love. If you're curious about discovering your life's purpose and aligning with your true path, check out my free guide available on my website. This guide is packed with practical tips and insights from your personal astrology to help you to start living in alignment with your soul's purpose. Whether you're just beginning your journey of self-discovery or looking to deepen your understanding of yourself, this resource is designed to support you every step of the way. So don't miss out. Grab your free guide today at yourpathandpurpose.com/life's purpose and take the next step on your path to living your purpose. So I guess I'm curious. I know I have a perspective, I observe in ways that you lead, but I'm curious how you have understood leadership, maybe how your leadership has even evolved to express what you just said to me is a recognition that you understand the perspective that I'm talking about. But how has your leadership evolved, changed over time? What did you know leadership to be, and how do you see it now?
Since I was a kid, I've always had, for whatever reason, I'm not sure if I came into this life with it or this was based on early childhood experiences or what, but I always naturally gravitated towards leadership. Like when I was a young kid, like I would be like the leader of my friends, if you will, like if you needed to like decide on a game or something like that, or like I played sports, I would usually be like the team captain. Um, and there was an aspect there that was natural. And then there was an aspect there that was trauma based and seeking validation and self-worth and maybe, praise from my parents that I never got or whatever it may be. And so when you ask about, my experience or my journey of leadership, it definitely, I think most leaders, I would reason to say, based off my experience and observation, most leaders start out wanting to lead from a place of trauma. And therefore, what they think leadership is a trauma mechanism that will hopefully, they're using it as a strategy to try to get their unmet needs met. And that's really selfish. And as you're describing, that's not what leadership is, but that's what we've been shown, right? You look at, the military or any of these, hyper masculine examples of leadership, and that's what we've been taught, right, through music, movies, society, etc. And so, yeah, growing up, I mean, while I had natural proclivities towards leadership, I certainly was going about it from a selfish place, and obviously that's a whole journey in and of itself to reach the point where you even have awareness of that. And then past that, it's a decision once you have awareness, because some people have awareness, but then they're not interested in change, right? So that's a whole, death and rebirth continually. And then, you fast forward to when I enter entrepreneurship and start to, build things, you quickly learn that people are not interested in being told what to do. They're interested in being shown what to do. And now you get into this conversation of embodiment. And I'm very big on embodiment in the way that I teach, in the way that we structure our offerings and everything. Like, I won't teach on something that I haven't done and that I'm not able to speak from experience. Very different from like a college professor who will give you, like, he can teach a whole semester on theory of this thing and he's never actually done it in his life. I bring this up because when I mentioned people are not interested in being told what to do, they're interested in being shown and led in what to do. I truly believe that right there was my greatest call forward into leadership right there, because when I started coaching people, I quickly realized that if I was hiding in the shadows, it doesn't matter even if my clients didn't know that, spiritually and karmically, I would be massively impacting my results and their results if I was not who I was showing them to be. In other words, if I'm sitting here telling them do this, this, and this, but I'm not doing these things in my own life, that is, what we typically call a hypocrite. And a lot of leaders do that. Look at our political system. Look at our legal system. Look at our look at any system, right? Eat this, guys, but they won't touch that. They wouldn't feed that to their family. Use these devices, guys, but they won't give those devices to their kids. So, we live on an interesting planet where most people are like, do this, but they won't do it. And, I just had a decision to make, kind of a fork in the road. Like, I can take the path that is, common, and I'm sure, some 3D results would come from that. But I was never interested in the 3D results. I've been on this path from the beginning because for self-actualization and spiritual evolution purposes. It's been such a beautiful journey for me because you quickly learn when you answer the call towards leadership, you are quickly reflected back that you are not who you need to be to lead. And so you're constantly shown mirrors of that next level. And every time you want to up level who you serve, how you serve, or the capacity that you serve at, you're reflected back that you have another death and rebirth to go through then. You have another level up because you're not who you need to be. And so, by the time, Cameron Martin comes into the LUC, and by the time you're aware of who I am, right? Or by the time an Aaron Abke wants to collaborate with me, think about how many deaths and rebirths I had to go through to become who I needed to become, to where Aaron is in my DMs saying, hey, I love your work, right? So this journey has been beautiful because we all have choices in our life, and it's no judgment against anyone's choices, but I do believe that on this earth, it is so similar to a video game, and you get to play it how you want, but the path I've chosen is a path of embodiment. And what that looks like is that I focus on the being aspect that you keep talking about, of who am I being, and then bringing that being into whatever I'm doing. And then when I bring that being into what I'm doing, it's not as important what I say in any of my content. It's not as important what you hear, like your left brain hears or thinks it needs to memorize from an LUC module, right? What is more impactful is my being that is channeling from the parts of me that don't even need words, and they're impacting the parts of you, and you're receiving things that I'm not necessarily saying out loud. And that I have found impacts and transforms people far more than, words or exercises or, the typical modalities that school focuses on, for example.
Totally. Yeah. And I love this part of the conversation. Really, it's about energetics, that you're talking about this death and rebirth, which, by the way, is where you have a lot of luck and good fortune in your chart. That's your eighth house of death and rebirth, always growing, always changing, myself included. My natal sun is in that house. Super important to consider as leaders. I loved what you were saying about who I need to become in order to do whatever this next thing is. Who do I need to be in order to lead this next project or this team or whatever it might be? And then your beingness attracts influences, right? You mentioned Aaron, but others. How you be, how you show up really energetically has an impact. Look, you know this, and I do too, that your message is not for everyone, that you can trigger all kinds of people, which is great. I mean, that's why we're here, right? To sort of awaken and shift things. But like your resonance, you are able to lead and influence through your own being those who are in resonance with you. And then there are tons of others who are not, and like, no big deal. That's fine. Um, so I'm curious what you might want to say around maybe resonance. And I love the conversation you were saying about embodiment too, especially in the spiritual space, but in the leadership space, there's lots of people saying the things, and, there's a difference between saying and then actually being.
Yeah.
Actually having healed yourself, actually having taught from experience, actually having led from compassion versus just saying it.
One of the things that came through when you were talking is it's been a recurring theme for me over the last few years of coming to more realization of how often we rely on tactics and strategies as humans when we're dealing with other humans. Doesn't matter if it's in a relationship and we're not even aware of it oftentimes, but we're emotionally manipulating our partner to try to get some unmet need met, or in a business sense, and you're, not happy with this performance or something. So you create this strategy or this tactic out of fear or control, and you may not even be aware of that, right? Or, you tie your self-worth to money, and so you manipulate and control other people via your marketing or your sales, or it can apply to any area of life. But I've been in the business space for 10, 11 years now, and when you learn from the OGs, you read the classics, and we've all heard of the industry leaders and such, and you start learning marketing, you start learning sales, you start learning leadership, and you're learning from people who, in the one sense, they have what you want, but in so many other senses, they don't. And it's been a really unique journey for me of like, well, shit, like, who am I supposed to learn from then? Because I don't have anyone to look to. I didn't know anyone doing what I wanted to do, where it's like what became my brand now came from a place of like frustration and feeling like I didn't have a path, because it was like, I know that wealth is our birthright, and I also value the holistic and multifaceted nature of humans, and we can be all of this. We don't have to like choose like wealth equals greed or poor equals you're somehow spiritual or whatever. So there's this aspect of like, so many of us are using tactics and strategies to try to manipulate outcomes, if you will. And one thing that I have found interesting on my leadership journey is like, how do we preserve the underlying pure intention of that, assuming there at some point was one, and then it got kind of taken too far? Because it is helpful to have an aim. I'm not a big fan of goals, but we could call them aims. And then people extrapolate that down and they go, okay, then we need to build systems. And then that ends up being controlling and manipulating and et cetera. And we've seen what happens with just about all the systems we now have are pretty corrupted. So how do we go about achieving an aim without tactics, strategies, fear, or control? And I think what you've been speaking to is, it sounds like we've arrived at the same answer. Well, there's another fuel source, and that fuel source is inexhaustible. Unlike the tactics, the strategies, etc., it takes so much unconscious bandwidth to try to rearrange the world and control the world around you, to where you're constantly needing to use little tactics here, little coping mechanisms here, little strategies here, little masks here. And when you shift fuel sources, you tap into something that is, from my experience, inexhaustible. But it is a whole paradigm, and you have to go through this death and rebirth of learning how to first lead yourself, and then how do you plug this into your community, your family, your relationships, businesses, whatever you want to do on this earth. And I think it's a beautiful journey that we all get to walk, one that I've been walking the last few years, of leading in a way where things still get done and aims still get met, but you're not using this kind of like monolithic, outdated approach of constantly trying to rely on tactics, strategies, words, systems, etc. And instead, you're just coming back to the basics of, we're all humans, we all have needs, we all desire connection, and authenticity goes a really long way.
What you're speaking about really is a shift in consciousness that is happening on this planet. And, the tactics, the strategies, all these kinds of things, and the ways in which most people have learned to lead were all created in a different consciousness. We look at some of the great leaders of the world and the great military leaders and the political leaders, and then From the development of the scientific method and then more scientific management theories of the early 1900s and even in the 60s and 70s of organizational behavior and these kinds of things, they're all designed, understood, created, taught from a different consciousness. And yet we're moving through a period right now. You have different terms for this, but we're moving through a period of a great shift in consciousness on this planet. And so ultimately, what you were talking about is a consciousness of ego, which is the past. It's all that manipulation, control, right? Where most of humanity was vibrating. But what we're being called to, you talked about a source, an inexhaustible source, and I love that, is now aligning with our higher selves, aligning with source, with oneness, with God, with creation. If we're thinking about manifesting, right, our egoic consciousness cannot create in the way that divine source does, right? So if I'm thinking, oh, this is the outcome, it's got to look like X, Y, Z, and A, right? And I have all of these tactics, strategies, you will literally limit yourself and you may not even be able to create what it is you truly want. But the divine and your higher mind and your higher self works in a completely different way. And so if you would just detach yourself from a particular outcome, from a particular way of having to do something, and instead just allow the expression of your being to happen, you'll be inspired to take action, of course. But it won't be from control and manipulation or whatever, and the results will be very different, right? And so this is something that we kind of teach in the space of manifesting, to at least recognize that your ego, your brain, your egoic consciousness cannot conceive of all of the possibilities in the universe. And so you've got to let that go so that the divine can move through you.
So I've talked about this a number of times. You probably heard me talk about it, but like I never wanted to be like an internet personality, if you will. Like I wanted to hide, and I hated talking on camera. I would be like, I'd have like red splotches everywhere. My throat chakra would be all off, totally not my normal voice. Just be like so tense in my body. I mean, it took me years to get comfortable on camera. And so, yeah, those aspects are definitely relevant. And that's one reason why, you know, I talk about all the time how business is such a spiritual journey for me. I guess it's doesn't necessarily have to be for everyone, but that's been my experience. And when I look at it through that lens, like it's been one of the most beautiful spiritual evolution catalysts for me, because I get to constantly, you know, address karma and have things reflected back and put myself in uncomfortable situations and heal and eventually create safety in situations that were once uncomfortable. And, it's a constant death and rebirth thing, but I've made immense progress there, and there's definitely still more for me there. And that's the journey that I'm on right now.
Well, it's a beautiful part of the journey for sure, and the nature of the work that I do. And so even for people who are similarly listening and going, okay, yeah, I have done this kind of work, I've gone to these retreats, I've gone to therapy, and all of that's wonderful, and our lives are full of catalysts, as you said, to show us patterns that we're still holding. However, we've incarnated many times in different cycles, and so we carry energetics, we carry trauma, we carry epigenetic imprinting, all kinds of things in our DNA. And for you, looking at your chart, the themes of this has happened in multiple ways, but the themes of rejection by groups of people, rejection of humanity, something about rejection in the spotlight, self-worth probably actually affected you financially, right? So in who knows how many lives, maybe you were a king who did something wrong and lost everything for your people. That's one. Or you were a leader of an organization and people fired you because whatever, you did something, or you said something that was unpopular and it affected you, or that, various times people socially rejected you. Maybe you were a witch in a lifetime, and, whatever, who knows? But sometimes these imprints, they're kind of like you said, they're so deep and it. So if I speak to the idea of self-worth and karma and responsibility toward others and being seen, you're hearing it and feeling it in your own being. I know this. But like those themes for you feel deeper and feel more like ugh, than maybe others because you've experienced it in many different lifetimes. And this time you said, yep, there's that fuel because I want to be in a position of leadership and I want to accomplish something and leave something behind in this life. And here's going to be the fuel that I need to sort of heal that. For all of us in our lives, there are areas where it's like, it can feel like, dang, no matter what I do, I keep coming back to this like thing. Or I even think in my life, I don't understand why this pattern is so strong or so deep or affecting me so much. And it's because it can come from other lifetimes, other experiences like that. Hey there. If you enjoyed the astrology reading at the start of today's episode, imagine how insightful a personalized reading could be for you. In my one-on-one astrology sessions, we dive deep into your unique birth chart to uncover your soul's blueprint and gain clarity on your soul's journey. Whether you're seeking guidance in your personal growth, exploring your soul's gifts, or wanting to understand more about your life's direction, an intuitive astrology reading with me can offer you profound insights for your journey. If you're ready to discover what the stars have to say about your soul's path, head over to yourpathandpurpose.com/astrology readings to book your session today. So what does it look like for you in your organization with your team, this balance of being and doing, and maybe this is in the realm of taking aligned action, I'm not sure, but what does this look like for you?
So I currently have a team of 10 and multi-million-dollar per year brand. We have 3 core offers, hundreds and hundreds of students, and a personal brand, media company, basically. We use, we really focus on putting out a high quantity and exceptionally high quality of free educational content across various platforms, especially YouTube long form stuff, which is a lot goes into that production, right? So your question was just kind of around like, how do I go about leadership and balancing it all, right? So I said I've been going through it. And what I mean by that is the last year, I actually essentially kind of lost myself a little bit in the sense of I built this thing that everyone around me looks at and goes, oh my God, like you must like love your life. You must be so amazing, like must be nice. But living it has sucked. And the reason that it has sucked is not because it's the wrong mission or I'm not aligned with my purpose or it's not fulfilling work or any of that. The reason is because we grew a little bit too fast and we hired a little bit too fast and we didn't have the systems that we needed, like the next level systems and processes, just because I personally, that's not my zone of genius. I thought we had systems compared to what we have now. No, we didn't have systems. We had SOPs, we had ways of doing things, but we didn't have like A to Z systems the way that a large organization has them, right? That's a big shift to go from like, hey, I'm a coach and a consultant or a teacher to like, I run a business that is like every aspect is systems department, you know what I mean? So that's the shift that we've been making the last year. And man, I just, like I said, it felt like I lost myself for a little while because what happened is the team doubled in size, and all of a sudden I'm managing 11 people and I'm the central node, and I just became completely reactive to everyone else, and I lost me. I lost my life. And I don't say that spiritually. I'm not like, it's not one of those stories of like, I put on 30 pounds, I stopped meditating, I got addicted to heroin. No, no, no. I keep up with my practice.
Those are pretty
Yeah.
extreme.
I like to do those sometimes. I keep up with my practices year round. It's not that, but it's that semblance of I'm not living, that's not what I'm here to do. I'm not. It's like I channeled this thing. That is my gift. I bring things from the unmanifest to the manifest. And it's not so much my gift to be all up in the weeds of every little detail of how that eventually runs itself. You know what I mean? And that's really been a big lesson the last year of like, what I'm here to be a channel and to birth things. And I'm not necessarily here to be all up in the operations of everything. There's an incongruency between what my soul is trying to bring through me and what I'm allowing to come through me, because I got caught up and stuck in this thing that I built. So it's like a weird paradox, because it's like most people would be like, that's most people's dream, to be able to do the things that I'm doing. And yet for me at this time, it's actually what's like hurting me. It's no longer for me. So I know that's not directly relevant. To make it a little more relevant to the leadership conversation.
Well, but I don't want to step over that, because what you're actually sharing is a lot about being and the nature of, um, frankly, as a leader, these moments where we can actually be misaligned with our
Yeah.
being and still
Yeah.
leading, right? And like sometimes maybe those are seasons that we need to move
Yes.
through as leaders. But in the conscious recognition, I think there's a big lesson here. What you're about to finish saying
Yeah.
is like, okay, I see it, and
Yes, exactly. Redirection. So I started feeling resentful towards what I had built, which is crazy because what has been built is totally aligned, but other things were out of alignment, like the way it was being gone about, if that makes sense. The thing that came through me, the thing that connects me to all that is, that lights me up, that inexhaustible fuel source I'm talking about, kind of like got put to the wayside because it came through, and this last iteration of what came through was a fucking tidal wave, and it created what you now see. That was one thing, Cameron. That was one iteration of what came through, and I've been building it for a few years. That was just one download. And so, but I'm realizing, like literally in real time, I just had a session with my mentor today. The things, when I'm in the right states of being, the things that come through me are so powerful that then when I ride the tidal wave, I lose the thing that got me there in the first place. And so it's such a balancing act of knowing yourself, understanding your zone of genius, systems, people, processes. There is a place for those things. And I've really been learning that in this season, because I'm sure you can relate. For most of us who are like building internet businesses and stuff, like a lot of people on the internet, they're not actually like running real businesses. And so, I wasn't taught these things. I was taught how to market and how to sell and landing pages and, content. And most of us know that, but we don't know how to run a 20-person organization with departments and KPIs and OKRs and streamlined systems, right? So that's a different world. And I wrote that world off because it's like, you said my first North Node, I think you said, is anti-authority. Yeah, I wrote that node off. I wanted nothing to do with that. I've never had a job. I'd never used my degree. I didn't want anything to do with it. And now I feel like I'm coming full circle spiritually too, where I'm like, okay, there actually is benefit here. It doesn't need to be a yes or no. It can be an and. Yeah.
yeah, there's so much you shared there too. I mean, first of all, the being a channel and having things come through and birthing and then like hands
Yeah.
off. My God, that
Yeah.
resonates with me like you wouldn't even know. Um, but there was a super practical lesson about being in what you said, right? So for anybody who's listening, a leader, like, yeah, I know being, but I have
Yeah.
things to do. I have a team. I have decisions to make. Of course you do. This is part of like your role. But beautiful what you were sharing is like your physical body, you were talking about embodiment earlier, your physical body was showing you misalignment in many ways, right? And so I think for a lot of leaders, there's this expectation that like stress is like, it's a thing. You're a leader, so it's going to be
Yeah.
stressful. Like, big deal. Get over it. Keep ignoring your body, keep ignoring your
Yep.
family, keep ignoring your bank account, keep ignoring whatever, and then get sick. Why? This is not what it means to lead. Also, you can't lead others if you're depleting yourself like that. But when the universe is literally showing you through physical body or whatever that something's misaligned, then that's for you to recognize it and then decide to take some other aligned action, which is exactly what you're talking about. So for those of you that are like, okay, well, what is this practical being? Ask yourself, how are you feeling in your daily life, in your work? What's going on in your body? Are you feeling super stressed about things? What is that? And I think for any entrepreneur, but definitely leaders too, it's the recognition of what is, I like what you said, your zone of genius. For me, writing, speaking, having conversations like this, and like the impact it will have, that's a zone of
Yep.
genius. Producing my own podcast, nope. Can I do it? Yeah. Can I do it well? Yeah. But this episode is going to be produced by somebody
Yep.
else because that will keep me in my own zone of
Mhm.
genius. And I think as leaders too, recognizing from our state of being like what actually is true for me and what's an easy or the best expression of my own soul. Well, as we close the conversation, I guess I would love to know what you see as a future of leadership. What would you like to see as a future of leadership in the world?
A group effort where it's focused on the truth coming through rather than this person's political agenda, this lobbying effort, this ego being perpetuated, revenge, greed, like what all the things that we're seeing now. So that's obviously a piece of it. And then the more intangible piece of it is obviously we need consciousness to be factored into these systems. Like all of our systems are, they don't, like you look at Western medicine, for example, they don't factor in quantum physics. They don't believe in or give merit to energy. So if every system is built on top of first principles, right? And the first principles say that energy isn't a real phenomena, well, then our sciences, our hard sciences, our social sciences, our legal structures, our political structures, and the way we communicate as whatever you want to call us, human beings, are all founded on that premise that energy isn't real. And that's the way that these things perpetuate themselves. So if we could have a shift in that and understanding that energy is real, and then the first answer I gave was more of like the container and the structure of how maybe that could fit into. So we honor consciousness, and then you build that into something similar to an idea meritocracy, because each of us are fragments of consciousness, and the perspectives that you have, Cameron, are slightly different from the perspectives that I have, which are going to be slightly different from the perspectives that Aaron has. But together in a round table, 20 of us are probably getting a way bigger picture of the whole truth than one of us could alone, because we reflect things back and we each had different upbringings and our souls have been on different paths. And so sitting in a mastermind, that is the original concept of what a mastermind is, putting a bunch of minds together is far more valuable than one mind. And yet we exist in a system where in reality, well, what they show us is that one mind is making all the decisions, but in reality, it's, let's say, 10 families. But even that, they're all pretty much thinking the same way. It's very myopic, and there's absolutely no commitment to the truth. That's not even of interest.
I like that you answered it from a systems level for our practical folks, and then also from a consciousness level, because the way that I describe what you were describing there is I talk about honoring beingness. And that's what this is, to honor the fact that each of us is a unique expression of the creator, has a perspective of existence, right? That inherently has value because we exist, right? So it's not that you're valuable because you've made it to management in the organization. You're valuable because you exist as a being. And your beingness contributes something to whatever collectively we're doing, whether it be a particular job or a project or just, who knows? There's lots of reasons why we need to lead. But when we come from, and this is the vision that I see, honoring beingness, what it truly means to be, and to recognize that, what, Jeremy, inside of you, this is a major life pattern for you. This is a point of, maybe weakness or something. This is sort of a past life thing. And because we're going to be working together on this, I can honor that. And I can honor your perspective. Imagine what a workplace, imagine what a team looks like when there is conscious awareness of the beings that you're around, whether you're using these tools or just because you've developed yourself enough to recognize the creator in everyone around you. That's a future that I want to see.
Beautifully said, man. Yeah, it's so individual, and that's one thing that part of the reason business is so fulfilling for me is because within our organization, and when you build an organization like this, each of us are growing spiritually and actually like able to do like healing work even in the workplace. Not that, like, I don't mean like we're having group calls where it's healing work necessarily during work time, but things come up, right? Like the work is not when you're meditating. It's the other 23 hours of the day. I'm always talking about that, right? And so when you're in high pressure, high stress situations, that is when you're going to have shit come up. When your livelihood is tied to something, that is when you're going to have shit come up, right? So the workplace is one of the most important places that we bring consciousness into because it's tied to money, which is tied to our safety. And that's just not something that's honored, and up until present day and on this planet. So really, really respect, the mission and the podcast. And it's been an honor to be on here with you, and looking forward to this episode airing. I really appreciated this conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, I loved what you said too about the practicality of what does spiritual in the workplace look like. It can look like you and I are in a meeting, and because I have a trauma issue with my father and Jeremy said this thing to me in the meeting, and all of a sudden I got triggered, right? I can feel terrible like that little boy did because my dad criticized me, or I can recognize that, oh, here's a moment I can just be conscious and bring awareness to it. And that, this consciousness you were talking about of shut up and just do your role as an automaton, we've seen where that has taken us in the world. But the question is, what really could be possible if we started to actually honor people for their soul's journeys and what they could contribute. And I love what you contributed today to this conversation. So thank you, Jeremy, for being here.
Appreciate you, brother. And thank you guys for those of you who are tuning in.
And if you're interested in discovering more about Jeremy's work, you can find information in the show notes.
Peace and love, everyone.
A heartfelt thanks to you for tuning into this episode. I'm Dr. Cameron Martin, and it's been an honor to support you on your path to self-discovery. As you reflect on today's conversation, remember that the journey toward living and leading from your soul's purpose is ongoing. You're never alone in it. Until next time.